Hi, shalom, friends. You know, there were three people sitting in a restaurant, and one of the three calls over a waiter, whispers something, and a couple of minutes later, the waiter brings back a half a cup of water. And one of the three says, "Oh, are you one of those who believe the cup is half full?" And the other one, not to be outdone, says to the waiter, "Are you the one that wants to bring a half empty?" And the third guy who ordered the water says, What are you guys saying? I wanted a half a cup of water. Plain and simple. He brought me what I needed, what I wanted." And I use that idea to capture the concept of all of us have challenges, sometimes even handicaps. And we sometimes wonder, what are we supposed to do with this? How are we supposed to deal with it? And the answer is, this is exactly what you need. Let me try to clarify. There was a fellow who was sitting by an office party, it's at the end of the year, and everyone's walking around with drinks, and he's walking around with a seltzer. And someone wants to offer him a drink, and he says, "No, thank you, I'm a recovering alcoholic." I said, "Oh, wonderful. How many weeks is it?" He says, "Weeks? It's 22 years I haven't touched a drop of liquor." So this friend says, "Wow, so why do you call yourself a recovering alcoholic?" And his response, "If I didn't call myself a recovering alcoholic, I would be an alcoholic." It's a very profound answer. He's constantly aware of the struggle that he once had. And he knows that this is not a struggle that will leave him forever. So he reminds himself, I'm a recovering alcoholic. Once he considers himself cured, there's a very good chance that he will have a relapse. In fact, it's likely he'll have a relapse. When you talk to recovering alcoholics who are truly consistent in them, you find that the vast majority of them are not only good, wholesome, indeed spiritual people, but they say as follows: I should have never have started drinking. But the fact that I did, and I fell rock bottom, I'm a much better husband, I'm a much better father, I'm a much better productive human being. And here we say, why would God give this person this weakness for alcohol? Perhaps it's connected to genetics, I don't know. Perhaps it came from his own background. Perhaps he had a father that drank too much. Why? And we don't ask why. God gives each person what he needs to work with, to work on, and to produce. And the example that I offered as the recovering alcoholic, they go through what's many times the level of what they call hell. But afterwards, they're stronger for it, and they become inspiring figures to all. Our Holy Rebbe had a remarkable and, in a sense, an extraordinary approach to all of life's problems. And of course, this is a very broad and general concept, so I'm going to focus on the type of letter which I'll share with you. A young man writes the Rabbi that he struggles with a sexual issue which the Torah defines as wrong. And he wants to be good, i.e., he wants to follow the laws and the regulations, but he finds it a tremendous struggle not to do this activity. And he sort of is at his end like, "Rebbe, why?" And the Rebbe wrote back, and this is obviously paraphrasing, "We don't know why Hashem gives certain struggles to certain people. What we do know is God never gives a struggle to a person that he cannot overcome." I'll add, God is not capricious, nor is he cruel. He will never give, to paraphrase the Talmud, he will never give a person a greater load than he could carry. So clearly, you were given the strength to overcome this. And this is now the novel approach. When you will exercise that inner strength that you have, you will see that your struggle to control yourself, contain yourself, actually will become an asset. It's something that you will be able to use in many other fields. To put it a little bit differently, if we have a certain ability limited in one way, God gives us the ability to not only compensate for the deficiency, but he gives us an inner strength to overcome adversity. And that's a quality that many of us desperately need. I myself attended once a very inspiring lecture. The woman was born with good sight, very accomplished, and basically an academic. And then she lost her eyesight. I forget what disease it was. And for a very long time, she walked in darkness, not only physically, but emotionally. And little by little, she picked herself up, became completely self-reliant. Incidentally, she did not like dogs, so she did not have an eye-seeing dog. And she accomplished a great deal, and she was an inspirational figure, and I came to listen to her. As I'm sitting, the introducer introduces her by saying, "This is Marsha," or something or other, and she lost her eyesight. She could not even find a place to relieve herself. She couldn't dress. She couldn't pick out her own clothes. She lived in an apartment building. She didn't know where the elevator was. And he gave a long list of handicaps and deficiency that she had to overcome. And now look at her. And I'll never forget her opening remarks. She thanked the chairman and then said, he told you all the things that I could not do. I'd like to begin my lecture by telling you what I can do. And that broke the ice. And she was humorous, but it's an amazing statement. When you see a person who has no vision, they might not have vision, but they have insight. The person who has no vision might have better hearing, more sensitive touching, more a sense of understanding people just by their voice. None of us want physical handicaps. None of us want emotional handicaps. But as life has shown us, we're often given both. What we have to understand is this, in some mysterious way, is not only some type of an issue that we can work through, as painful as it might be, but it is a hidden blessing. Because in order to overcome this, you have to marshal determination. You have to be confident. You have to be optimistic. You have to be willing to try and try and try again. Those are assets that not everyone has. I'll conclude with a very interesting reality story. I'm not going to say the name of the rabbis or the settlement that they created in upstate New York, but this is the story without the names. There was one Holocaust survivor, a young rabbi, who came, and he was welcomed by his peers and by elders. And as they thanked Hashem for the opportunity of starting life again, the elders asked this young, dynamic rabbi who once led, he was an upcoming star in the Hasidic world, they said, "So what are your goals?" He said, my goals is to recreate the world that was destroyed. And they looked at him and they said, many of us have had that goal, but America is different. And we tried, but there's so much apathy and ice, we gave up. She said, no, I will be successful. I'm stubborn. And he explained. He said, my grandfather was a holy man. My mother, his daughter, once baked cookies. I, as a little child, wanted those cookies, but she said it was for the Shabbos. And I said, but I want a cookie. So she was looking for a place to hide it. So she figured if she puts it into the study where my grandfather was, this holy great rabbi, I wouldn't have the chutzpah to go into the room. And just to be doubly sure, she put the cookies on the highest shelf of his large bookcase. My grandfather was studying, and I come in. I was taught not to disturb him. But of course, I did not come in to my grandfather's study to talk with him. I came in for the cookies. And it did not take long for me to realize that the cookies were out of reach. I knew I could not ask my grandfather for the cookie. So I was trying to figure out, how do I do it? So I took a chair. My grandfather was aware of what I was doing, but said nothing. He kept on studying, and I took a chair, and I stood on the chair on my tippy toes, and I was nowhere close to the cookies. So I went outside, and I was looking for a block of wood that I could put on the chair. I put a block of wood on the chair. Now I stood on top of the block of wood on top of the chair, and it was somewhat rickety, and I still couldn't reach. So I went out to find another piece of wood, and I'm building this little tower on a chair, and it's actually dangerous. And I'm standing and shaking and on my tippy toes, and my mother comes in. And she says, I won't say his name, so make up the name, Yankala, what are you doing? And the grandfather picks his head up out of the book with a big smile. He says, he's trying to get the cookies. So the mother says to her father, well, why didn't you tell him he's not going to make it? He said, I had admired his stubbornness. If he wants a cookie, he'll try to get the cookie. And if he's not successful once, he'll do it a second and a third time. I was not going to interfere with that good trait, a powerful trait of being stubborn. I want something, I'll do it. Ultimately, he did not get the cookie, but he said, I'll never forget, I trusted my grandfather's words. I'm stubborn, I'll get what I want. And sure enough, he was successful. So, is it good to be stubborn? Depends where, what, and how. Can you use stubbornness in a good way? There's no question you can. Can you use a handicap in a good way? Yes, you could become a more understanding, empathetic person. Can you even use the painful emotional trauma that some of us carry? And the answer is that too. If we carried it, we have the strength to not only overcome it, but to utilize it. I would end with a blessing. The Jewish people have suffered so much over all of these years as a nation, 2,000 years in exile. And yet, with all of those scars, we're able to take the negative and transform it into the positive, into a positive attitude of life and of happiness. Let's hope and pray that there won't be any more of this suffering, and we will use the accumulated strength of 2,000 years of exile to catapult us to a world of goodness and kindness and happiness.